Hello. My name's Joe and I'm an alcoholic. It's an honor and a privilege to be provided an opportunity to share at an AA meeting. Congratulations to the birthday celebrants. It's awesome. Thank you for celebrating with us. And welcome to the newcomers. They'll tell you around here you're the most important people in the room. You're not as important as I am right now. Yeah, alcoholism, a fatal progressive illness, unless it is interrupted by some sort of intervention. Many of us around these rooms would suggest that it's a divine intervention. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't make the claim, as I heard so often around these rooms, that my best thinking got me here, because I never sat on a bar stool or was locked up in some apartment getting wasted thinking about when I'm going to go to AA. My thought process never got there. But yet, a day came where I had this weird thought that said, I think I have a problem. I wasn't sure. I was only on a 17-day bender, and I certainly wasn't doing real well. And somehow, there's that voice. And then the next thing that came in is, well, what am I going to do about it? The people I was using with and drinking with, I told them that I'm going to go to my employer, which I haven't seen in a few weeks, by the way, and I was going to tell somebody. And that's exactly what I did. I'm not proud of the fact that I did get into a car and drive over there. It was likely one of the most dangerous things anybody could have ever done. Gratefully, nothing happened. I did walk in, and they didn't need a whole lot to view. They knew the minute that they saw me that there was something seriously wrong. And I told them, I spilled my guts exactly where I had been and what I was doing. And they had me sit down, and I could watch through a picture window. Some guy's on the phone, and he keeps looking up, and he's saying, like this with his finger, just wait. Then he came out, they found the guy in the back of the factory, they put me in a car and they took me to a hospital. Next thing I know is I'm talking to a guy with a suit on. God, I hated people with suits. And he had a tie too. And the worst part of him is he seemed happy. Gosh, how happy can these people be? And he asked me all kinds of crazy questions. How much do you drink? Do you ever smoke pot? I say, well, yeah, it's all right, sure. Helps me come down. And he says, how about some cocaine? You ever do any of that? Now, mind you, from the time I had that thought to the time I was in front of this guy, about 6 or 7 hours had passed, and I had already gotten well. I denied I had ever done any. And the guy laughed hysterically. And he almost yelled. It was real loud and abrupt. And he said, you're so frickin' high, you'll float right out of this room, and we got a place for you upstairs on the unit. And I told him, nope, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I says, I've got things to do. I've got things to take care of. I'll tell you what, I'll be back tomorrow. I did walk out the door. However, I was involved with a lot of crazy people, and I was what you call a distribution engineer. By doing that, I needed to get myself out of trouble before I walked into that facility, and I was able to accomplish that in 24 hours. And I did walk back in, and I was grateful at the moment that I was there for at least 10 days, I could say that. And then I started trying to figure my way out of there. I couldn't figure my way out. How did I get myself into this mess? Well, wouldn't you know it, a bizarre divine intervention just continues on. And I didn't know it at the time it was going on. I had to see this all in hindsight. The nurse came up to me and said, Joe, you have a visitor. I said, visitor? Nobody's supposed to know you're here. There's all this confidential stuff around here. Says, yeah, there's a visitor down in the lobby, and we want you to go talk to this person. I said, okay. Walked down the lobby, there was this guy standing up there, and I says, who are you? I have never seen you before. He said, well, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jim. I says, what do you want? You know, I'm suspicious about everybody. I mean, it's just the way I roll. And he says, well, the day before you came in here, you went and talked to my son, and you told him where you were going to go. And so I knew where you were going, and I knew to come here. I said, oh, is that right? I says, so what? He says, well, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I wanted to talk to you. And I said, well, okay, so I heard about you guys up there in the unit. I says, you're one of these guys who likes to work with others? Are you like one of these sponsor guys? He says, yeah, I'm a sponsor. I says, so are you here because you want to be my sponsor? And he says, yeah. I says, oh, cool, I got a sponsor. These are the olden days in Alcoholics Anonymous. Back in Chicago where I got sober, we called it plucking a pigeon. And I wondered why we were called pigeons. For those of you who may not be familiar with that, back in World Wars, they used carrier pigeons, and they tied these little messages on their little legs, and they let them fly, and they carried the message. So they somehow nicknamed sponsees as pigeons because they call you up and tell you all their crap. And I thought, okay, I'll be a pigeon, and now I've got a daddy. So there we go. When I left that unit, I hooked up with the guy, and I wound up, for those of you who've ever been to the big city of Chicago, there's a place that's very well known over there. It's called the Mustard Seed. That became my home group. It's a crazy kind of a place, 70 meetings a week, and it's riddled with old-timers. Lots of guys that were sober longer than I was old, and they were growly, very abrupt, abrasive individuals, big pot bellies, a lot of tattoos, and suspenders. And what they told me a lot was sit down and shut up with loving care. Because what I found out as I continued to go to this place is that if it wouldn't be for them, I don't believe I'd be here sober today. Those people really gave a crap about newcomers. And it was absolutely incredible to have that place called a home group. And I'll be forever grateful for that experience. This sponsor and I started to work together quite a bit. And things started going really, really well for quite a while. And then, wouldn't you know it, there's something about being in Alcoholics Anonymous that I got introduced to, that those who are around here sometimes have adversities that come about. And sometimes it's your turn, and I'm always glad it's not mine. My sponsor had one of those times when I had about 1.5 years of sobriety. And he was really having a real difficult go at it. He was getting evicted from his apartment. And with that happening, he needed a place to stay. I had a little one-bedroom apartment. I'd never lived alone before. Very limited space. And he asked if he could sleep on my couch until he got himself back on his feet and went somewhere else. And I said, that'd be fine. After about 6 or 8 weeks of him practicing sloth on my couch, I learned a little bit about the Al-Anon isms. You know, codependency is something that I wasn't willing to participate in. I also learned what an Al-Anon relapse is, by the way, and that's a moment of compassion. You know, and, yeah. So I needed to tell him to leave. And that was a real difficult time for me because I contributed that this man had saved my life. He was there for me every day on the phone for the entire time, without fail. Even when I had 1 year of sobriety, he said, we're going to go on a trip together. I says, oh, really? He says, yeah, you and I are going to go down to New Orleans. And I'm thinking, oh, I've never been to New Orleans. So we got airline tickets. We check into a hotel on Bourbon Street, and I'm sitting there watching all these people get wasted, and I look at him with a dazzled, kind of crazy stare, and I said to him, what the hell are we doing here? This has got to be the worst place for a sponsor to take a sponsee. This is crazy. He says, well, I wanted to tell you when we were down here that you needed to do a 4th step. I said, you needed to bring me to Bourbon Street to do that? Kind of crazy, but yeah, we had a time. I stayed sober. We got back, and I'm glad I had that experience as well. I needed to get a new sponsor. So I went and did that, and he kind of got lost. I thought he was going to relapse, and perhaps he did, so I thought. I wasn't sure. So I got a new sponsor, and this guy started telling me a lot about the 1st step. I needed to learn that it's not the 1st step in drunkenness. It's the 1st step in recovery. I never sat on a bar stool and talked to the person I was drinking with or the person I was doing drugs with about what character defect I'm working on. It just wasn't the story. The 1st step in recovery, I had to come to a determination that alcohol or drugs was never really my problem. It was a solution to a living problem that I was having. That living problem was in place prior to me ever picking up my first drink or drug. And when I used, it was euphoric. It fixed me. Alcohol and drugs were a remedy that failed me in the long run. Alcohol and drugs were the manager of my life. When I got sober, I lost the manager. Then my life had become unmanageable. Thus, that's the 1st step in recovery. It no longer had anything to do with the symptom. It had everything to do with the person I was looking in the mirror, and my recovery program was born. I realized that this thing is centered in my mind, and I've got a lot of work to do. This first sponsor was a lifesaver. The second one was even more of a tremendous asset to me. He was a 12-step guy. He was all lined up with the Intergroup office in Chicago and the 12-step call thing and so on. And he got a phone call, and he called me up, and he says, Joe, I'm going to be going to the airport tonight, and I'm going to get somebody who's just getting out of treatment, and I'm going to bring him to the meeting tonight. That was the meeting at the Mustard Seed. They had elected me as secretary of all things. By the way, when they elect somebody secretary there, they don't do it because they like you. The format there is you share every week for 6 straight months. You do the first talk, and then the meeting has comments. Well, they didn't have a darn care about what I was saying. They told me every time, we don't like anything you have to say, and so on. Their job, those old-timers, was to put me up there. They railroaded me to fix me. So when they went around the room with the comments, they told me everything I was doing wrong. And I bared that for 6 months. They couldn't wait for elections again to get the heck out of that. And those son of a guns, they elected me for another 6 months. They weren't done. They left me sit up there for 3.5 years. Every Monday night at 8 o'clock. And today I thank God. But this sponsor, when he came to that meeting that night, after picking up a person at the airport, I was stunned. Absolutely stunned. Because he wasn't picking up some dude, he was picking up some gal. And I thought, this is interesting. When I was doing my little pitch, he walked into the back of the room and she followed and she sat down and I'm staring. I'm going, my gosh, this woman is beautiful. She is absolutely gorgeous. And so I got to know her a little bit. And the more I got to know her at the coffee shops, at the meeting after the meeting, the worse it got for me because he was hanging out with her and I didn't like that. I didn't like it very much at all. So then when things turned a little weird for him, then I started getting happier. So the line goes, if you want what your sponsor has, you're supposed to be willing to go any length to get it. So when he was kind of done with that, I called him up and I said, I'm going to ask her out. She's really cool. He goes, yeah, I think she likes you too. It was a pretty noble thing for him to say. So I did that. I wound up having 3 dates They were awesome. She wanted to hold my hand at one of the festivals. We had a great time. And the next thing I know, she says after that third date, she says, my parents are coming in to visit and I want you to meet them. I says, oh, nice. And then we went on and wouldn't you know, I drove her off to work that evening and she says, my parents really like you. I says, oh, well, I like them too. And she says, I told my mom and dad that you were the man I'm going to get married to. I says, you did? She says, yep. I says, so you want to get married? She says, yeah. I says, okay, let's get married. 3 months later, I had an AA wedding. 50 people showed up from AA. There was a 200 people wedding, but 50 people from AA drove all the way from Chicago to the outside of Detroit, Michigan area in Livonia, and we had a wonderful wedding. And we wrote our own vows. We used the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Our highest authority is a loving God as he may be expressed in our relationship, and so on. And we got very creative. We figured that if the traditions could keep this motley crew together, it certainly would work for us too. Yeah. So we went and did that, and gosh, life goes on. Then another miracle, a miracle I consider of Alcoholics Anonymous. Learning how to have a relationship. See, I never had a relationship in my life. Every time I was with someone, I call it a hostage crisis. I needed to learn how to be married. Now, I did gain a wife, and sadly, I lost that sponsor, wouldn't you know it. He did show up to the wedding, and you never saw him again. That's just kind of, I think he was just hoping. I don't know. But I did get a guy who was married, and he was quite insightful, and he helped me a lot. So I learned to the best of my ability to be a supportive family member, and we were, God blessed, to be able to get pregnant. She didn't get pregnant, we got pregnant. And that was really something to embrace, and it was terrifying. And as our child was born, then I have this little baby, and it's the joy of our life, a bundle. And the next thing you know, she says, do you remember on our second date? I says, yeah, what did we do? This is after a little while now. She says, well, we were at that Mexican restaurant. I says, yeah. She says, remember I asked you if you wanted to move to California someday? I said, vaguely. She said, you said you would. So we're going to go ahead and pack up and we're going to move to California. Guys, women have the best memories in the world. If you agree to something, they will never forget. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, if we say one thing and then do another, we're not exactly being honest now, are we? So I'm, yeah, okay, we're going to go. So we moved to California. Next thing you know, we have 18 years there. And Alcoholics Anonymous is different all over the country. I really was kind of surprised. You get something called, people, when they're done sharing down there, some of you I know this, they go like this. Every time you're done saying something, they give you the big rah-rah. Well, even if you say, like I did at my first meeting in Oceanside, California, some young kid, he had to be 17, 18 years old, he's shooting his mouth off, I'm going to do this, and I'm done with Alcoholics Anonymous, this place is really awful, and I tell you what, you guys are going to watch me because I'm going to go out there and drink like a gentleman. He gets up and walks out the door, and they're all clapping and going, this is awesome. I go back to my wife and I say, my God, these people cheer you on around here when they want to drink. And I says, I don't think I could stay sober here. Let's go back. No was the word. Well, anyway, we eventually got ourselves settled into Orange County, and we were in a really good place, and I wound up getting to a place where Alcoholics Anonymous I needed to gravitate to and find a way, and I was able to acclimate into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous once again on a level that was very unfamiliar to me. There was a lot of really big meetings. It was easy to get lost in those meetings. There wasn't a lot of people telling you to sit down and shut up anywhere. I found out that they like to love people into the grave sometimes. Everything is really, we're going to love you till you love yourself. Tough love was not the equation, and I really had a difficult time getting used to that. Eventually, I understood that things are just different elsewhere. They didn't have a problem. I was having the problem, and I was able to move forward. A real wonderful thing happened to me. I got sober reading page 449 from the third edition of the big book, and now it's page 417 in the fourth edition. The paragraph on acceptance. The newcomers in the room, if you don't know this, you need to. It's a great page, 417. This was so powerful for me because I read it every morning and it really helped me get through my day. When I got to a meeting in Laguna Beach, I saw a man in this room that was walking by my garage often. And I said, hi, when he was walking by my garage. And I said, man, it's really surprising to see you here at an AA meeting. He says, you've been walking by my garage and all this other stuff. He says, well, yeah. He says, I've been coming here for a long time. And I says, oh, well, that's cool. I says, well, I want to really formally introduce myself. My name's Joe. And he says, oh, that's great. My name is Paul. I says, well, nice to meet you, Paul. I says, your lovely wife is here too? He says, oh, yeah. He says, this is Max. Would you like to meet Max? And I put something together kind of quickly. I'm thinking, nah. Paul, Max, I said to the guy, you're not the guy from the big book, are you? And he says, oh, yeah, I'm the guy. And I thought, my gosh, I was starstruck. And what was really incredible about that, I found out that a person with notoriety in AA can be the most humble person in the world. I want to say one thing about Dr. Paul, because this was his story. It's not mine, but it was my interaction with him. He hated having that notoriety. He told me face to face, if he would have known all of that recognition, he would have never wrote that. I just thought that was extremely humble. He disliked when people came up to him with the big books and wanted him to autograph it. He just thought that was absolutely awful. I did have one really important question to ask him, something that baffled me for years. I said, Dr. Paul, you wrote something that said, nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. I said, that confuses me. All the tragedies that take place. People have difficult experiences. People are victims of crimes. Their houses burn down, as we've recently seen. Stuff happens. It's awful. How can you say nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake? He said, Joe, you needed to read the sentence the way I wrote it. I says, well, meaning what? He says, I'm talking about God's world, not the world that we used to live in. Because when we didn't live in God's world, none of us behaved very well. And I thought, my gosh, the spirituality and the principles of that paragraph on acceptance brought a whole new light to my existence on how to live life on life's terms. I now today, as I walk through meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and listen to all of you share, I am always listening to see how God was working in your life. I'm listening for those divine interventions that you don't know about yet, that in hindsight you will find. It's just amazing. I have now come to a place in AA where I have formally believed that I never brought myself to Alcoholics Anonymous. God brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is Alcoholics Anonymous that brought me to God through the 12 steps of recovery. I did a lot of 12-step work in California, and it was just a real wonder to be able to get really to a point where I was so intertwined with the fellowship. When it came to a place where our daughter was growing up, she started to become a younger adult and started to go through the adolescent things, and then the father-daughter rivalry kicked in, and there's all kinds of things that were going on, and we're just having a good old time being family. And eventually the day came where our daughter wanted to go to college, and started looking around at California universities. They're so darn expensive. She found one up here in Oregon. It was Oregon State University, not the Ducks, sorry. However, she came up here and went to school, and next thing you know is we're chasing our daughter. It's our only child. So here we are. We moved to Oregon, and I've now been up in this area for 16 years. But what's amazing, Alcoholics Anonymous is another adjustment here in Oregon. I mean, all of you, you're listening to me right now, and you're making a claim. I know all of you, well, maybe not all of you, but a lot of you already said, my gosh, this guy's got an accent. I assure you, I do not have one. All of you do. I'm perfectly, Anyway, Alcoholics Anonymous is different everywhere, but it's also the same everywhere. The steps are the same. The approaches may be different. The destination is still not drinking or drugging one day at a time. I have not had a relapse since my first day of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can't tell you that happened because I wanted it to be that way. I was one of two people around the rooms of AA. People who condition themselves to leave and people who condition themselves to stay. I spent my first 6 months or a year conditioning myself to leave. I'm not like you, I didn't do that, da-da-da-da-da. We sometimes hear about the yets in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't care about no yets anymore today. What I'm concerned about with are the agains. Because if I'm doing something again and again and again, I'm not learning what all of you are teaching. I'm marveled when sometimes people say, the longer I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, the less I know. I almost feel sorry for you. I'm in the midst of the greatest teachers in the entire planet in this fellowship. If it wouldn't be for all of you passing on what you have so freely given to me, I would not be standing here today. I am a sponge. I will get whatever I can out of you. I used to be such a taker. Some of that is still there when it comes to your message. Today, from being a taker in the early days, I'm now a giver of that. I want to give back to all of you what's been so freely given to me. And I'll do that to the best of my ability. Let me tell you, it's really interesting, some of the things that come about. There was I think, 6 years ago, I got a letter in the mail. A handwritten letter. Snail mail? I mean, the young people, wow, what's that? You guys can't live without a phone. My phone came with a booth. It's just a whole different deal. This letter, and I looked at the name on this, and I thought, my gosh, my past just caught up to me. The past. And it was was Jimmy Jr. Remember the guy I mentioned from the treatment center, Jimmy Sr.? Jimmy Jr. sent me a letter, and it was, hey, Joe, I found you on the internet, and I just wanted to write a letter just to see how you're doing, and I got a phone number, if you want to call me, please do. If you don't, that's okay. I pulled out my phone right out of my pocket, dialed it right away, and I called this guy up. He's living in Wisconsin, and I said, hey, man, gosh, it's good to hear from you. How are things? And so on. I find out he's a pothead, wouldn't you know it? And after about 20 minutes, a half hour of some reminiscing, I had to ask, is your father still alive? I says, your father was my sponsor. I says, I was under the interpretation that he had relapsed. He says, no, as far as I know, he didn't relapse. I says, may I impose on you and have his phone number? Do you think that would be okay? And he said, sure, and I wrote it down. After I hung up the phone with him, I dialed that number right away, and there was that voice on the other end of that phone. It's Jim! I said, Jim. This is Joe D. You sponsored me back in 1983 and 1984. I wanted to call you up, and I wanted to tell you, thank you for my sobriety. I said, we parted on a difficult way. And I said, and you're the man that I believe saved my life. God worked through you to help me. And for that, I will be forever grateful. And the man on the other end of the phone was crying. I had tears in my eye, too. We make direct amends whenever possible. Whenever. And who would have thought, after 33 years, that something like that would just abruptly show up? I still get choked up. I only got to talk with him one more time, and I don't know if I'm ever going to see him or hear from him again. That's okay, because that little piece of me now is at peace. That was something that was never going to go away. I respect everyone in Alcoholics Anonymous. The adversities that people go through and they survive is incredible. We are not victims, people. I was a victim when I got here in my head, and all of you told me I was a survivor. We survive our stories. Can you imagine? You tell other people in this world, like at the Starbucks, what our story is, they call 911. Over here we go, congratulations. We are just impressive. I mean, it's incredible what we're able to go through and survive. So it's really, really important. So that was a real big, important part of it. One other experience I want to definitely get to, which is really, really important. When I had a year of sobriety, I was able to go back to the hospital that I went through treatment at. They allowed you to spend the entire evening once a month on the unit, just interacting with those who are in treatment, just kind of be there for them. And I thought that was just a marvelous program for them to have and to be serviced by the H&I committee. So I was definitely there. I was game for that. And there was one night when I went in there, and there was a lady that came in. And this lady, she was kind of receptive, so I sat down by her in the lobby, in the greeting area. And I said, "Hi, how are you doing tonight?" And she says, "Well, I'm here, and you're volunteering, so I guess I'm not doing that good." I said, "So I guess you have a story." She says, "Yeah." She said, "I had a relapse. I was in the program before I got here." I said, "Oh." I says, "Are you willing to share a little bit about that?" She says, "Yeah." She says, "Well, I had 27 years of sobriety, and I went back out." She said it very subtly. My stomach was turning. That scared me. How does a person with 27 years of sobriety go back out? How are you lucky enough to get back to this facility? That's the real key. So I asked her, and I don't know what possessed me. I believe this is another God question that was just working through me. I asked her, "How long before you took that drink did you know you were going to take that drink?" She nodded her head and put her eyes up in the air, and she says, "Interesting question." She said, "I knew I was going to do it when I had 20 years of sobriety." And I thought, it took you 7 years to carry out that? She said, "Yeah. And I've thus learned another valuable lesson in Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics don't make plans. They plot. If the plot is in motion, it's typically done in stealth, secret. And don't we all know we're only as sick as our secrets? If there is a person in this room who has a plot, it's not too late to interrupt that plot and remain sober. We all know what happens. I marvel when people say, "I don't know what's going to happen when we pick up a drink." I know exactly what happens when we pick up a drink. I have no reservations whatsoever of any kind. We either go to prisons, we die, we certainly don't do well. And if we're lucky enough to get back, we certainly don't do it while we're skipping. It's not, hey, I'm back, jee-ha. It's not the way it is. We are lucky to be here. We're grateful to be here, collectively and individually. I come here to celebrate sobriety. So this is what I had to do as a result of that particular interaction with this lady at that treatment center. I carry that with me to this day of sobriety that I have right now. Just how does a person get to a point where they take 7 years to carry out a plan? It bugged me. And I started looking into this. And I had found that it is a process, not an event. Nobody gets struck drunk like a bolt of lightning. Maybe if you're brand new and you don't have a program, that could possibly happen. But for someone with a lot of duration, with a lot of meetings under their belt, there's something that has to be unraveled. And what's unraveled is the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous piecemeal. It starts off with the 12th step. I'm not going to work with others anymore. I'm not going to carry that message. I'm going to stop doing service work. Prayer and meditation, that's for all of you. I don't need this anymore. I got enough knowledge at this point. I don't need to improve anything. I'd rather take your inventory than mine. The 10th step, the heck with that. It's easier to take yours than mine, so I guess that's going to become comfortable. Now I might even create behaviors that will add to my amends list. Oh, that list is going to grow, but I don't want to do those now. Forget that. I think I'll just save them for future reference. I want to hang on to some of these because I'm having fun. Am I being humble, as it so suggests in the 7th step? No, the opposite of humility is ego. It's starting to kick in. It's really alive and well. My character defects, as they have been identified in 6, are now glaring and glowing. I now have new avenues that I need to take a 5th step about. No way I am going to take these to the grave, because I cannot face all of you with all my years of sobriety telling you about the behaviors that I've been doing. It's really necessary now to do an inventory. I best not do that. I best not. I don't want to do that. I cannot comprehend the word serenity right now. There's no way. Is my life in God's care? I think God's will is no longer there. I think it's now my will. I'm now self-will run riot. Am I starting to sound insane? Yeah, my life is now manageable again. I know I can drink. After a couple of years of sobriety, I went up to somebody and said, "Gee, I'm so glad my life is starting to feel like it's manageable again." Great response. He said, "What'd you manage to screw up today?" Our lives had become unmanageable. There is no step 12 and a half. God is the manager of our lives. Our lives are in God's care. That is crucially an important daily routine for me to acknowledge that. I do not have the power to take something back from God and then give it to Him. Give and take. It's not a yo-yo step. My life is in God's care, or it is not. It's that cut and dry for me. So what's so important is, through the years I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, what's really been an amazing awareness to have is that the people who have helped me the most are not the ones that I have picked. Such as, I want them to get, if you want what that person has, well, okay, that's great. A sponsor, a friend, this and that, I'm going to go see what I can get from them. And then the person on the other side of the room that I've never met before makes a comment in a meeting that helps me the most of the day. You never know who is going to touch one's heart and one's soul. That is called the language of the heart. What comes from the heart will reach the heart. As long as I have heart in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to receive that message, and I can't wait to hear what all of you have to say. I love meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a clock watcher. It's almost meeting time. It's almost meeting time. I can't get too early. I got to get there. I don't want to get too early, but I want to get there when the door's open, and I like to stay late. That's just really, really important to me. I have more meetings today under my belt than I have days sober. Meeting makers make it. So, for those who are sitting next to somebody that you may not know, or sitting at a table with somebody you may not know, that person sitting over there might be the one that saves your ass. You just never know in Alcoholics Anonymous. I spent a lot of energy looking for God in these rooms. I seek God today. I can't say I have found God. I seek God through all of you, in search of me through all of you. If I were to quit looking in books and in buildings, bricks and mortar facilities from the very beginning, I would have been in a better place. The distance of true sobriety is only 12 inches. It's from the head to the heart. One step for every inch. Once I realized that God lives in my heart, then I found what I needed to have found. As long as I'm living a spiritual lifestyle, which just means nothing more to me than I have a good attitude. If I have good spirit, then my life is spiritual. That's what I have today. And when I look around these rooms, I gravitate to those happy people today when I used to hate their guts. Why do we tell newcomers we're grateful? I don't know. Somebody said one time because it pisses them off. I don't know. It truly is the avenue. I'll conclude my share here this evening by suggesting something. Sadly, all of us have seen, and for those who might be new, you will see, that people sometimes don't fare very well. They go out and they do research and development. It's a very sad day when we lose some of the people that we've come to care about. We would like that not to happen, however it does. It does. If they're lucky enough, which I've already mentioned a couple times, if they're lucky enough to get back, then we like to ponder or probe and say, what happened? And they usually don't really want to say very diligently exactly what it was. But one thing I can tell you that I've never heard. I've heard the dog died. I heard my wife left me. I heard, a family member didn't make it. All kinds of things. The reason, which is simply an excuse to go out and revisit the waters. Never heard anybody say, I got drunk because I was grateful. Never once. A grateful alcoholic will never drink. No matter what's going on in my life, the alcoholic needs to learn how to stand in the eye of the hurricane. If we step outside, the whirlwind will get us. We stay in the eye, there's a calm. There's also a wolf pack metaphor. We need to stay in the middle of the pack. If we ever get to the point where we stray away, the strays get picked off. Today, I am a middle of the herd guy. I not only live Alcoholics Anonymous, I talk Alcoholics Anonymous to anybody, anywhere. I was recently on a vacation on a cruise ship. There was a gentleman that wasn't even on the cruise ship. An Al-Anon came to the meeting on the cruise ship. She gave her husband my phone number. He lives in North Carolina. So of late, we've been having some wonderful conversations with a gentleman. I come to find out he's 66 years of age like I am, and he's also going to have 40 years of sobriety just like I am in a couple months. And we have been just hitting it off like no tomorrow. And these are the beauties of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I meet people, no matter where I am, no matter what I do, I feel like I've known you all my life. Did that ever happen in a bar? Did it happen in a drug house? No. What we have here is so special. We try to explain this to those people who are not understanding who and what we are or what we do. It is so baffling to them how does a group that has behaved like we did come to a place where we are fun, loving, caring people? So thank you, God, for all of you tonight. Thank you all for being here. This is a great meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, as they all are, and it would have been a hell of a meeting if none of you showed up. Thank you so much for having me.